Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was the bodyguard of Azula. Naruto is banished from Konoha, but gives them the slip and boards a ship. Soon after, he is shipwrecked on Ember Island, and is saved by Azula. 3 years later, Naruto is Azula's bodyguard while she hunts for the Avatar, but did he see the last of Konoha? Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 59, Saying Goodbye and Saying Hello. Location, Coastal Hotel. Anko and her team waited in silence in their suite. It had been their job to take the scroll holding the swords away, while the others fought the Akatsuki members. They had gotten back to the hotel with relative ease and were now dealing with the hard part, waiting. How long has it been? Yugo asked Anko. He was worried about his teammates. He had wanted to help them, but he also admitted the fact that he might lose control wouldn't be beneficial, even if Anko was there to calm him down. It's been well over 3 hours. She answered, checking the time on a nearby clock. For a quiet moment, she studied her student. Yugo, I'm proud of you. It took courage to admit you would be more hindrance than help in the fights. Not to mention a good deal of pride. He replied, making both her and Karen smile. He was right, of course. He was willing to put what pride he had aside and dispute the fact he would be helpful in fight when both Sokka and Suigetsu suggested it. Nevertheless, I am proud of you. She repeated. Perhaps, when we return to Konoha, it will be time for you to write your name in the snake summoning scroll. He was surprised by those words. Are you sure about that? He asked, making sure he hadn't heard wrong. When Sasuke had refused to become the second snake sage, they had offered it to Anko. She had also refused, but promised to take possession of the scroll and pass it on to the student she thought deserved it. Yes, I am. She answered. If there was anyone who deserved to be called the Snake Sage, she believed it was Yugo. And I'm sure that Lord Jiraiya and Lady Tsunade would agree with me. I hope so. It was every possible that he would be a part of the next generation of the Densetsu no Sannin. Tsunade and Jiraiya would probably look at him and be hard-pressed not to see his predecessor. But it also made him pause for a minute. If he was to be the next Snake Sannin, then who would be his teammates? Sakura would probably be the next Slug Sannin, but the question lay with Naruto. It was still unknown if he would actually stay when the Akatsuki were finished. When Jiraiya had been pushed to take a new student, he had replied that he already had one and nothing would change that. If Naruto didn't stay, there could be no new generation. They all heard someone banging on the door to the suite. Getting up from where they sat, both Karen and Yugo moved to either side of the door while Anko looked through the peephole. Who is it? She demanded. It's us. Chojuro answered. She could see him standing in front of the peephole, with Suigetsu and Reimo behind him. Looking over at Karen, the redhead got the point and quietly clasped her hands in a hand seal, closing her eyes. After a quiet moment of focus, she opened her eyes and nodded. Come on in then. She opened the door as her students stepped back. The Kiri team walked in, Reimo closing the door behind him. So, how did it go? He's dead. Suigetsu said simply, holding up the bag that held Kisame's head. The bottom of it was dark and if they felt it, they would have found it wet. But it was not wet enough to drip, so they wouldn't have to try and explain why there were spots on the carpet that smelled funny. What about the body? We hid it for the time being. We had used the explosive tags we had in the fight and none of us know a katon jutsu. We'll take care of it tomorrow once we get the right stuff. Which would mostly be lighter fluid and some matches. Next time, just try learning a katon jutsu, moron. Karen told him, albeit without her usual amount of scorn. If anything, it looked like she was glad to see the Hozuki clan member. Could you two lovebirds save the fighting for later? Reimo asked as he all but sank into a chair, putting Samahata at its side. I'm too tired to care about it right now. Even though they had glared at him, they didn't yell that the other wasn't her girlfriend/boyfriend. Those who had noticed that little fact didn't have time to say something about it as the door to the suite was banged on again. It's us. Jiraiya's voice spoke through the door. After Karen quickly checked and verified that it was Team Paragon, they were let in. So, how did it go? Anko asked as they all settled down into the surrounding chairs. I've got a head in a bag that'll get me a whole lot of cash, June said with a smirk, holding up a bag of her own. Mama's happy. She eyed the bag that Suigetsu placed to the side. Is there any chance of me getting that bag too? The fact that all three members of the Kiri team scowled and reached for their swords was enough of an answer for her. Fair enough, I had to ask. You've already got one head, June, Naruto told her. Both he and Azula laid back on the love couch in the suite's living room. Their legs were tangled together, and it almost looked like they had been like that for a while. Naruto lay against the right side while Azula lay on the opposite side. You don't need another one, the blonde told the bounty hunter, putting his hands behind his head. You're the one who told me that there was money to be made on this side of the planet, she replied, lounging on the other sofa in the living room. Besides, I wasn't serious. Well, that's good to know, Sokka remarked from where he sat against the kitchen counter. The bounty hunter wasn't serious about getting more cash. Sarcasm noted and ignored. She replied, looking over at the tribesman, but I want to know one thing, Sokka. When you said that Kakuzu was there and you drew your Zanpakuto, you opened your eyes. How did you know he was there if your eyes were closed? I felt him coming by feeling him through the earth, he replied with a shrug of his shoulders. While the others were confused by what he said, Naruto knew and let out an impressed whistle. You've already figured out how to feel vibrations through the earth? That's impressive, Sokka. How long did it take you? I asked To for a couple of pointers during the month in Ba Sing Se. It went a lot faster after that. He chuckled a little. She sure was surprised when I could do it. You did it in a month? It took me more than half a year. He was even more impressed. When it came to learning things that dealt with being a paragon, the whole seismic sense had been one of the more annoying ones. It had been right up there with the ability to cut off the link to the avatar state. The mere memory of the avatar dummy that Saifu had used to help him still grated on his nerves. Yeah, I don't have the full grasp of it. I don't think I'll be able to be a human lie detector like Toph is, Sokka admitted. That's okay, I can't do it either. Probably out of the four of us, Suki will be the only who could. What makes you say that? Suki asked, looking at the blonde from where she sat next to her boyfriend. Well, you are the paragon of the Earth Kingdom, he replied simply. I wouldn't be surprised if you could understand a badger mole like Sokka understands Akela. Both the tribesman and the wolf shot him the exact same look. It was a compliment, you two. Relax. Anko, may I ask you to do something for me and my team? Reimu said to her, getting her and everyone else's attention. Can you show us the rest of the swords? Sure, it's not a problem, she replied, pulling out the scroll that held them. She unrolled it on the table in front of her. She placed her hand on the paper and muttered a quick kai. After the smoke that had sprouted from the scroll dissipated, the 4 remaining swords of the 7 swordsmen lay on the table. The Kiri team stood there, staring at the swords in awe. It's almost hard to believe that we still got them, Chojuro said with reverence in his voice. For a long time, Kiri had only one of the swords. But now all 7 were returning, and he was glad to be one of the carriers. And all 3 of them looked forward to when 4 more shinobi were able to join them. Personally, I'm amazed that it was these 7 swords that caused the First Shinobi World War, Jiraiya remarked. He had gone into the kitchen and found the sake. As he poured himself a drink, everyone looked at him. What? He asked when he finally noticed the stairs. How do you know that? Karen asked the toad sage. I read my history, he replied before taking a drink. It was a few years after the villages had been created and began vying with one another for resources and power. Even though the Shodaime Hokage tried to bring peace via a summit, it didn't last long. Everyone was ready to test out the power of their village, they just needed an excuse. In the end, that excuse came in the form of Kiri shinobi kidnapping an Uzumaki clansman. What? Why the hell would they do something like that? Reimu demanded. He knew that Kiri didn't exactly have a stellar history, but as far as he knew, they weren't the ones who started the war, merely the ones who joined it. Apparently, they had discovered the secret of the clan, but what they didn't know that the secret only laid with one person in the clan. So, thinking that every member of the clan knew it, they kidnapped one of the younger members who was talented at the forge and forced him to supposedly create the secret. In the end, they got those 7 swords. He gestured at the swords lying on the table, and the swords by the Kiri team's side. What's the secret? Suigetsu asked. Saka cleared his voice and lifted his Zanpakuto to answer his question. You mean? That little show during the duel between the dead woman and me and my teammate was real. You can thank our teacher, he helped us forge ours. The water paragon told him. So does that mean? Chojuro left the question hanging as he and the rest of his team looked at the swords. You're not listening, Jiraiya said with a shake of his head. I said that only one person in the clan knew the secret and Kiri had grabbed the wrong person. The swords are just unique, nothing more. There was just the slightest look of disappointment on Suigetsu's face when he heard that. So, what happened after that? Karen asked. What do you think happened? Once it was revealed that Kiri had kidnapped an Uzumaki, his clan demanded the return of him and Konoha agreed with what he said. Kiri refused, saying that he had come willingly and Kumo backed their claim. Everyone had their excuse and made more of them to either start fighting or join in the fighting. Next thing you know, there was a war. He finished with another drink from his cup. So, by right, these swords belong to the Uzumaki clan? Karen wondered aloud, looking at the swords. They belong to me and Naruto. Karen, are you an Uzumaki? The blonde asked the redhead quietly. There was a small look of surprise on his face. He didn't know that he had kin that was still alive. Then again, he hadn't made an effort to find them, especially after he left. But still, it was a surprise. She too was surprised, but more by the fact she had inadvertently revealed who she was. Yes, I am. She admitted, not looking him in the eye. I see. He fell quiet for a moment, letting the information sink into his head. But even so, let's not try and go there. The swords have been in Kiri since their creation. They belong to them. He finally told her. Yeah, you're right. The redhead agreed. All 3 of the Kiri team gave him a look of gratitude when she said that. They were half afraid that he would agree with what she said and would try to take the swords by force. And they had no doubt they would be outnumbered if it came to a fight. In any case, let's celebrate, Anko declared, springing up from her chair. We took out 2 Akatsuki members. Bust out the sake. The sake is already out, Jiraiya told her. And what do you mean we? Your team went ahead with the scroll. And you sat in the tree, June retorted, looking up at the toad sage. So, you have no right to speak about the fight. I was giving moral support, he protested. And so were they, Azula replied. They were just doing for both teams and at longer range. In terms of moral support, they win. In any case, let's party, Anko announced. You'll have to give me and Reimu a few minutes before joining the fun, Saka told her as he got down from his chair. He and I need to speak in private. We do? Reimu asked with both confusion and surprise. He really didn't have anything to say to the tribesman. Yeah, we do. Come on, we'll talk in the next suite down. Both of them went out onto the balcony as the small celebration began. Sokka went down the ladder first, climbing down swiftly with Remo right behind him. As they reached the lower suite, the tribesman hopped off the ladder and walked into the living room. So, what do you want to talk about? Remo asked him as he entered the living room as well, closing the balcony door behind him. Do you still have your father's kunai? Yeah, I do. Why do you want to know that? Can I have for a moment? What? Why? He was very cautious now. His father's kunai was one of his precious possessions. He wasn't one to give it up so easily. Just give it to me. I promise I'm not gonna kill you with it. He held out his hand, waiting for the kunai to be given to him. Remo was hesitant but gave him the kunai. When he took it, his eyes turned black and he was engulfed in a cocoon of energy. The bright light made Remo close his eyes on instinct. When it faded and he opened them again, it wasn't Sokka who stood in front of him. "Dad?" he asked, unsure if it really was who he thought it was. But it was true. Kenji Toucan stood before his son. "Hello, Remo," he said with a smile. "It's good to see you again." He was exactly same as Remo remembered him. Black shirt and pants underneath a Kiri Jonin flak jacket, and his headband pushing his hair back. He held his kunai in his right hand. "But, you're dead. You've been dead ever since that night," he protested. "That much is true. I am dead. My soul is currently being used by this young man." "Why?" he demanded. "If I had to hazard a guess, I would say, so I could talk you?" It was a rhetorical thing to say, and yet he did it with sarcasm and a grin. Oh, right. Remo had been too surprised by the fact that he was talking to his father that he hadn't thought of that. Kenji looked over his son. "You've really grown a lot up, haven't you?" he asked quietly. When he saw Samahata's hilt sticking out from behind Remo's back, his eyes widened slightly when he realized what that meant. "Kisame's dead, isn't he?" "Yes, he is," his son answered with vicious pride in his voice. "And I took Samahata from him before he died." "I see." He fell quiet for a few seconds before speaking again. "Are you proud of what you did?" "What kind of question is that, Dad?" he demanded. "Of course, I'm proud of what I did. Why shouldn't I be? I'm one of the 7 swordsmen now. And in order to become that, you killed your own uncle," Kenji pointed out. "Kisame lost the right to be called my uncle when he killed you," he replied angrily. "He had bashed your head in with Samahata in case you've forgotten." "Of course, I remember. I was the one who got bashed in the head," his father replied. His tone was casual, like it was nothing serious, and yet, there was a subtle rebuff in it. "Remo, you can't hate your uncle forever." "I can if I want to," he replied stubbornly. "He's the reason I was tormented through the academy and my genin years." Every time he had tried to fight back against his tormentors, he somehow always managed to be the one who got in trouble. He had hated every single day of those years. "And I know I've got a way to make those assholes pay for what they did." He got a slap up the back of his head for that. "Remo Toucan. I thought I taught you better than that." Kenji seemed to loom over him, his face set in anger. "Don't go looking for payback just because someone insulted you." "Well, why not?" he shouted back. "They put me through hell. Why shouldn't they feel what I've felt? Why shouldn't they suffer by my hand like I suffered by theirs? That doesn't make you a shinobi. It makes you a vengeful man. If you hurt them, they'll just try to hurt you back." His stern gaze softened. "You can be the better man." "What if I don't want to be the better man?" Remo turned around and looked out the balcony window. He couldn't keep eye contact with the soul of his father when the conversation went like this. He wanted to so desperately beat his tormentors into the ground when he got back to Kiri, but he knew that his father would be disappointed in him if he did. If you weren't the better man, you wouldn't be one of the 7 shinobi swordsmen of the mist, would you? He didn't look back, but he knew that Kenji had a smile on his face. I hate it when you do that, he said after a few seconds of silence. I know. His tone was melancholy, like he too was remembering better days. Does your mother still think of me? She never stopped. She didn't remarry after you died, and when I came home the first day with my headband, she thought I looked just like you. He still remembered that day with happiness. It was one of those few memoirs after that night he was glad to have. I see. He walked forward and laid a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. When you get back, tell her I still love her. I will. I will. He promised. It was the least he could do. I am proud of you, Reimu. Despite what you may think about my feelings about your hatred to your uncle, I am proud of you, and I love you. I know you are. He kept his voice guarded. If he didn't, he would lose control of his emotions. Goodbye, Reimu. He took his hand off of his son's shoulder. Bye, Dad. He finally said, keeping his gaze focused out the window. After a couple of seconds, he felt the weight of a familiar kunai on his shoulder. Thanks for that, he told Sokka as he took the kunai and put it back in his holster. Would you be talking about the kunai or the chance to talk to your dad one last time? The tribesman asked him. That was the second thing soul bending could be used for, to bring comfort to those who had lost a loved one and wanted to talk to them one last time. He would have to thank Saifu later for pointing out how Reimu felt about his father. Both, he answered simply, still keeping his voice guarded. Come on, we better head back up there. Odds are they already started the party. Sokka shrugged. Odds are Anko is trying to make Naruto miserable by describing what she and Irika do in bed. He replied as he followed Reimu out onto the balcony. Both of them smiled at that thought. Anko would do exactly that if she wanted to make Naruto cringe or bang his head against the wall. He looked around and only saw gravestones as far as he could see. Where the hell am I? The blonde wondered aloud. He didn't have a lot to drink during the party, no one really did. They were shinobi on a mission. They couldn't let their guard down. We would happen to be inside yourself, a voice said to him from behind. Spinning around into a stance, Naruto saw that it was a bone-white skull sitting on a large rock. How long do you plan on ignoring me anyway? Where's the fur ball? He asked, looking around again. Hey! Kyubi! He shouted. His voice echoed among the gravestones, but he didn't get a reply. What did you do to him? He demanded, looking at the skull. I didn't do anything to him. This is a private conversation, and he wasn't invited. And that was rather rude of you to ignore me like that. The skull didn't sound at all insulted, it sounded like he was commenting on something. Well, who are you? I am you, of sorts. He couldn't help but raise an eyebrow when he heard that. You're me? He repeated what the skull had said. What are you, a Zanpakuto? Not quite, and that's your fault. It retorted. Wait, how is that my fault? He asked. The last time he had a sword was his Jien, and he lost that during Sozin's comet. 1 minute the thing went flying through the air, the next he was doing the limbo to avoid a spear. I've been trying to get to you ever since you and your woman moved into that house. This is the first time I've been successful. If the skull could scowl at the blonde, it would vehemently. Have you even looked at that safe yet? How do you know about the safe? Naruto demanded. He hadn't told anyone about it and nobody had asked him about it, not even Azula. Have you, or have you not, looked at the safe? It repeated, enunciating each and every word. No, I haven't. Now would you tell me where the hell I am? He looked around again, trying to see if they were actually somewhere. He had his suspicions when the skull said they were inside him. The place looked nothing like the fox's jail. The skull groaned loudly. Cammy, no wonder I'm just a skull. You haven't even looked inside the safe yet. I can't believe I spent that long waiting for the right person to show up again, and said person haven't bothered to come looking. What in the name of Cammy was that idiot thinking? Hey, don't talk to me like I'm not here. Besides, I was busy. He had been so busy with trying to hunt down the Akatsuki, and avoiding his former teammates, he hadn't had time to look in the safe. First of all, don't be so arrogant to think that I'm calling you an idiot. Second of all, I'm just hearing excuses from you. The skull seemed to glare angrily at him, making him flinch a little. Oh, let me guess, you're still trying to figure out where you are, huh? How did I know that? It finished his question, sounding bored. I can't believe the idiot would have wanted me to work with you. Just take a look at a couple of the gravestones, okay? Throwing an annoyed glare at the skull, he looked over at one of the graves. When he saw the name inscribed upon the headstone as well the one next to it, his eyes widened in horror. What the hell is this? He demanded as he looked at the gravestones. He knew those two names. They had been a pair of solders under his command when he was fighting in the Earth Kingdom. They had been caught in an ambush that cost them most of their limbs. In the end, he had killed them himself, after they had begged him to do it. He had refused at first, but eventually complied, snapping their necks as they slept. It looks to me like they are the gravestones of those you've murdered. The skull said with a chilling nonchalance. But when the blonde looked back at it, the grin it wore seemed almost manic. My, there are a lot of them, aren't there? But there aren't this many. He protested. The gravestone stretched on endlessly. He had a horrible feeling that if he tried to find the end of it, he never would, in any direction. I don't have this much blood on my hands. Are you so sure about that? Who said that the graves here were all killed by you purposely? Who said that they all had already happened? Somehow, it managed to whistle. Forget about blood on your hands, you should be swimming in it. Where the hell am I? He screamed with a loud note of panic in his voice. I already told you. We are inside you. And this is how you see yourself. He came awake with a gasp. Had he not been a shinobi, he would have lurched up into a sitting position. Naruto, what is it? Azula asked, waking up as well. It's nothing. He assured her, calming down. It was just a weird dream. That was the best description of what he had dreamt. Before she could push, he had noticed that there was light peeking past the edges of the closed window. Come on, it's already morning. We might as well get up before FS-sensei tries to do that himself. Yeah, you're right. She agreed. They didn't want Jiraiya trying to get them up any more than having to spar with him. Both were painful in their own way, though one had to deal with physical pain more than the other one. The rest of the morning was spent by the teams in packing up and getting ready to move out. It was a quick, methodical process. The only hiccup in the process, as Team Paragon found out later, was when Yugo went into the bathroom and found Karen and Suigetsu doing the shower samba, which is like the bedroom tango, only you're vertical, and there's a lot of running water. Hot or cold depends on your preference. The only Yugo said when he saw the two of them was you couldn't have waited until everyone else was done in here? That had made everybody laugh. By the time they were all done, they had left the coastal hotel and were making their way out of the city. They stopped twice so Jiraiya could say goodbye to Ryoshi and surprisingly enough, the owner of the club. What was that all about? Sokka asked him as they walked away. The Kiri team had gone on ahead to take care of Kisame's body. What do you think it was about? He retorted. He had a small look of happiness on after he had said goodbye to the owner. He had also surprised most of them by hugging her, which she returned before walking away. That it was one of your former conquests that you're on friendly terms with now? June suggested from atop of Nyla. That wouldn't have been a surprise to them. They had seen enough of those conquests in and around Konoha. To their actual surprise, he had a look of disgust on his face. That's wrong, very wrong. Don't ever think it's like that again. He ordered them. If it's not that, then who is she? Suki asked. That's none of your business. He snapped back. Deciding to drop the subject, they walked away from the club in silence. But despite the silence, they left the city of Misu in high spirits. They had taken out 2 of the known Akatsuki members and possibly crippled their finances. That would be cause for a proper celebration when they got back to Konoha. When they reached the forest, the Kiri team was waiting for them. We've got a problem, Chojuro said without preamble. Kisame's body isn't where we left it, and we've found no trace of it anywhere nearby. Is there any chance of a wild animal having taken the body? Anko asked. She knew that if another shinobi, or kami forbid, one of the crime families, had found the body, it would be taken for experimentation. There was no trace of it whatsoever. Suigetsu repeated. There was nothing to suggest it was even taken by people or animal. But it's not there. There was a small tone of worry in his voice when he told them this. But the important thing is that you have the head. Yugo told him. Even if the body has been taken, it would not hold as much information as the head would, especially if he's not a Kekei Jinkai user. And that much is certain. Reimu agreed. We just have this weird skin color, that's all. He lifted an arm to emphasize his point. Let's keep moving, Naruto said. If it's no great loss, we should move on. The longer we stay here looking a headless body, the easier it will be for people to spot us. They could all agree with what he said. So they just kept on walking. Location, Toby. He sat in darkness, waiting for news to come to him. When others who didn't know him took notice of him, he pretended to be a child in an adult's body. That allowed them to think of him as an idiot, which he used to his advantage. But to those who knew what he was truly like knew to never think of him as such, or even underestimate. Taking notice of Zetsu stepping out of the wall, he looked over at him. Well, the masked Akatsuki member said. Kakuzu is dead. The white side of Zetsu told him. It was simple and to the point. Good. But we've got a problem. The black side of Zetsu growled. Kisame went with him and got killed in the process as well. And the Kiri team took Samahata with them when they left. He said nothing for a couple of minutes, sitting in silence. That was not part of the plan. He finally spoke. Who knew that Kisame went with Kakuzu? No one did. The white answered. We only found out when we went to go see if they had killed Kakuzu. The black told him. I see. He stood up from where he sat. Then we'll have to do something about that. It seems that we should repay in kind. Location, Mizukage's office. The 3 of them stood in front of Mei's desk. They had traveled with the Konoha teams for a couple of days until they reached a crossroads. There they said their goodbyes, with Suigetsu and Karen throwing insults at each other. Everyone else believed that was how they showed their affection for each other. After they had parted ways, they made their way to a nearby port and caught a ship that was heading to the land of water. Once it had docked, they went straight for Kirigakure. And here they were. I take it that since the 3 of you are here, you were successful? The Mizukage asked them. Her desk was cleared of any and all papers, allowing them to have her undivided attention. Yes, Lady Mizukage, we were. Chojuro answered. Taking the scroll that held the swords out of his bag, he placed it on the desk. The remaining 4 swords are sealed within. And this bag has Kisame's head in it. Suigetsu told her, raising the bag for her to see. Thank you both, she said with a smile. She turned to look Reimu. You have taken possession of Samahata, she stated, looking him straight in the eye. Yes, I have. He replied, holding her gaze. I took it from Kisame's hands, and it has accepted me. Then congratulations on joining the Seven Swordsmen. She told him. I know you will make me and the village proud. Thank you. He bowed his head for a brief moment. When he raised it again, his eyes held a question. Lady Mizukage, may I please leave? There is someone I need to see. Of course, you are dismissed. He bowed his head and quickly left the room. Taking long strides, he soon exited the building of the Mizukage and walked down the street. The street itself didn't have many people on it as they had arrived around midday. Those who were on the street took small notice of him. He was glad for that. He didn't really want to know what he had achieved until after Lady May had made it public. He didn't get very far before two shinobi around his age stood in front of him. Well, if it isn't Little Lime. The one on his left said in a sneer. He was somewhat bulky, but still had acne on his face. Still pathetic as ever, I see. No kidding. The one on his right agreed. He was also bulky, but less so than the one on the right. He didn't have any acne, but he always seemed to have sniveling pitch to his voice that made him seem even more annoying. How did they let a loser like you out of the academy anyway? He just stared at them. These two had been among the worst of his tormentors when they were in the academy. Ironically enough, he never cared about what their names were. Do you guys need something? He asked them. Or did you fail another mission and want to take it out on me? They both laughed. How cute of you, you actually think it's possible for us to fail a mission. The left one said with a roll of his eyes. That was all the answer the new swordsman needed. So, you not only failed, but badly. He replied, summarizing. I shouldn't be surprised. After all, you guys didn't even make to the actual Chunin exams. He said with a smirk. It was common knowledge that even though their team had went to Konoha, they had been fooled long enough by a genjutsu, that they were disqualified before even getting to the first exam. The mocking looks on their faces turned to rage. What the hell do you know, you little brat? The right one said, giving him a hard shove. We're still superior to you in both rank and skill. So don't get lippy with us. He was so tempted to pull Samahata out and give them a beating, but his father's words still echoed in his head. You can be the better man. Those words were enough to make him pause and stop from raising his hand. Whatever. If you guys don't need something, get out of my way. I need to be somewhere. He tried to walk around them, only for them to step in front of him again. He tried to push past them, but they shoved him back. You think you're hot stuff, don't ya? The left one snarled. You're just shit. Shit. You've been shit ever since you came to the academy. Hell, you've been shit even before that. Your mother is a whore and your uncle is a traitor. You should just go off and die in a hole before you manage to shame this village. He couldn't help but laugh when he heard. If there was anyone who would be doing the shaming, it's you two. And I'd say you already done, several times. Now move. He ordered. Both of them roared in rage and lifted their fists to hit him. He stood as still as a statue, waiting for the first blow to strike him. But before that blow could land, an older man appeared from behind them and knocked their feet out from under them. What the hell are you thinking? He yelled at them. I can't leave you idiots alone for 5 minutes, can I? He looked at Reimu. Sorry about that. He apologized. When he saw the skull-tipped hilt, his eyes widened. It's not a problem. He assured the older shinobi. And yes, I am. He told him when he noticed his eyes. What the hell, sensei? This guy insulted us and you yell at us? The left one complained from he lay on the ground. I'll let you tell them all about it. Reimu told their sensei. He started walking past them but stopped and looked back at them. For the record, you two, considering I'm a chunin and what I've got on my back, I don't think I'm hot stuff. I know I'm hot stuff. He kept on walking and didn't look back, not even when the two sprouted looks of horror as they looked at his back. He kept on walking through the streets. Despite the ruckus they had caused, no one had paid any more attention to him than it was needed to them. And he was glad for that. Finally, he came to the apartment complex that he lived in. Walking in and climbing the stairs, he quickly made to the floor where he lived. He walked up to the door of his apartment and opened the door. "Mom, are you in here?" He called out as he walked in and closed the door behind him. Is that you, Reimu?" she said from the kitchen. "Just give me a minute, you caught me putting away the groceries." He waited for a minute as she finished up. When she finally came out of the kitchen, the smile she wore faltered when she saw the sword on her son's back. "You did it," she finally said, the smile disappearing. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I did," he replied. "He's dead." "I know he is." She looked over at a picture on the wall. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be here." He knew what picture she was looking at. It was a picture of the two of them, along his father and Kisame on a picnic. It was the day after Kisame had become the wielder of Samahata. They had decided to celebrate by having a picnic in a nearby park. He had happy memories of that day, as did his mother. "Mom, there's something else," he told her, walking closer to her. "One of the people I was working with had the ability to summon the spirit of a dead person. After what happened, he took me aside in private and summoned Dad." She looked at him in surprise and disbelief. "You're joking," she declared. He shook his head. "No, I'm not. I was able to talk to Dad one last time." What did he say?" He hesitated briefly. "He said that he was proud of me, and that he still loves us both." There was silence between the two of them. Then she walked up to him and engulfed him in a tight hug. He didn't resist but instead returned it. And when he heard her crying quietly, he couldn't hold it in any more and began to cry too. They were tears of both sadness and happiness. Location: Konoha Hot Springs. Azula groaned in relaxation as she sat in the water. "Now this is more like it," she thought happily. After they had gotten back into the village and delivered their report to Tsunade, she along with Suki and June were persuaded by the girls of the Konoha 11 to come with them to the hot springs. Karen declined, saying she knew what the conversation would lead to, and Yugo said he had something to talk to the Hokage about with Anko. "You look like you're enjoying yourself," June commented as she sat beside her. "I am," she replied, stretching in content. "I am too," the bounty hunter agreed. "I'm even looking forward to spending some of that money I got." They had stopped by a bounty station before getting to the village, so she could cash in on Kakuzu's bounty. Needless to say, it was quite a bounty. "On what?" asked Suki, who was sitting nearby. "Bar fights and drinks for everyone?" "Hey, I have a sense of fashion," she protested. "I have yet to see it," the Kyoshi warrior retorted with a smirk. The bounty hunter only scowled back at her in response. "I see the three of you are enjoying yourselves," Ino said as she swam nearby. "Why wouldn't we?" Azula asked the blonde Yamanaka. "This is just pure bliss." "It sure is." "So, did you guys do anything interesting while you were in Mizu?" she asked with a wiggle of her eyebrows. The three of them looked at her with a little confusion, but everyone knew what that meant. "Oh Kami, here it comes." Sakura groaned with a roll of her eyes. "Ino, could you not do this? We don't need a new scrap of gossip every single day." "Don't be so high and mighty over there, Sakura," she replied. "We both know that you're just as interested as I am." "No, I'm not," she protested, her voice rising slightly. "Well, I am," Tenten remarked from where she sat in the hot springs. "So, what happened?" she asked the female members of Team Paragon. Well, we killed 2 Akatsuki members. Is that what you meant? Azula asked with a supposed innocent smile. She had a funny feeling that she wasn't going to like where this was going. No, I meant if any of you got busy. Ino replied with a grin. So, this is what Karen meant. The 3 of them thought in unison. She did. June said, pointing a thumb at Suki, who blushed slightly in response. We all know that already. Hinata said quietly. We know that quite extensively. She had a blush, and that made Suki blush even more. Yeah, that was not exactly the welcoming party we had in mind that night. Ten said. But then again, we weren't planning on having you 2 join us. Okay, moving on. Sakura said hurriedly. Before anyone could say anything else, they heard a splash come from the other side of the wall. Come on in, guys. Kiba's voice called out. They heard more splashes, telling them that more people were getting in. Hey, Naruto, aren't you going to join us? Choji's voice asked. I don't go into water unless there's a locked door behind me or armed guards protecting me. The blonde answered. You must be joking. Niji said to him. He's not. Sokka replied. I convinced him to do that once on Ba Sing Se, and he agreed because he thought he was safe. We needed a platoon of Dai Li to fend off the girls. There was a moment of silence, and then they all heard laughing. Welcome to the club, Dobe. Sasuke said. They could all but see the smirk on the Uchiha's face. Shut up. Naruto said shortly. Even though he didn't say the name, they knew who he was talking to. Ooh, sounds like the guys are here. Ino said with a grin. Anyone else want to peek in on them? She swam over to the wall and stood up, leaning forward. Sure, why not? Ten joined her. Wait, you're peeking on the guys? Suki asked with a half-strangled voice, shock evident on her face. I know. It's great, right? The blonde Yamanaka said, looking back at them with a naughty smile. Women have been peeking on the men here for a long time, and they've never known. The holes the women before us made are discreet, and yet, they give a great view. She looked over at her friend. Hey, get over here, Sakura. There's a great view of Sasuke. Hold on, I'm coming. She made her way over to the wall before looking back at the others. Are you guys coming? She asked them. I am good. Hinata said, heavily blushing at the thought at peeking at half-naked guys. June looked at her teammates and shrugged. Might as well. She said before swimming over to the wall. Azula and Suki soon joined her, figuring they might as well join the group and drink in the sight of their half-naked boyfriends. They weren't disappointed. Suki saw Sokka sit against the side of the spring, displaying his chest for her to see. Naruto sat at the edge of the pool, his towel covering what was important. All in all, the only people who weren't there were Shino and Lee. Man, Naruto sure has gotten really impressive. Ino whistled quietly as she eyed the blonde. Azula glared at her for that comment. Don't even think about it. She growled. Hey, I'm just saying. So Shikamaru, have you and Temari done it yet? Kiba asked, looking over at the Nara from where he lounged in the middle of the spring. His expression was trying to go for innocent, but failed short. Considering her brothers keep planning to kill me whenever we go near each other, no. Shikamaru answered without even opening his eyes. Don't worry about it, Shikamaru. Choji told his friend. If you marry her first, they can't do anything about it. How troublesome, my best friend has become my mother. He replied with a frown. That just made most of the guys laugh at him. You know he's just doing it to show he cares. Niji told the lazy shinobi with a smile. Besides, it's quite interesting to watch. Speaking of which, how have you and Ten? Kiba left the question hanging, though his grin didn't. That is none of your business. The Hyuga told him shortly, shooting him a look that would have killed and mutilated him 3 times over. You and Niji? Asked Ino as she looked over at the girl in question. That is none of your business. She replied in the same tone and look. It reminded everyone on their side of the wall that if she had a weapon, bodily harm would happen. Are you that desperate to get laid? Sasuke asked Kiba, bringing the girl's attention back to the wall. Oh, shut up, Mr. Hide me so the fangirls won't rape me. He retorted with a snort and a scowl. That was a legitimate excuse at the time. The Uchiha told him, his voice rising slightly as he spoke. It's called knocking on the front door, Sasuke. Not breaking the window to get in when I'm taking a bath. He shouted back. I apologized, didn't I? Besides, I didn't have a whole lot of options at the time. It was either breaking the window to get in or risking it on the main street. I went with the lesser of 2 evils. They were out in swarms that night. Could have been worse. Sokka commented. How could have it been worse? Sasuke demanded. They could have been willing to share. Every single one of them shuddered slightly at the thought. One of the disadvantages the fangirls had was that they usually wanted the target all to themselves. If they decided to share, their target was doomed. How do you even know about fangirls anyway? Niji asked him. The last time I checked, you didn't have any. I don't, and thank the spirits for that. I just watched what happened with him. He pointed at Naruto. That was what you were doing. I thought you were cheering them on and wishing you could join. The blonde replied with a smirk. That's a point to you. The tribesman conceded. But why would I want to join them? I have a girlfriend. That reminds me, when did you 2 start doing it? Kiba asked, bringing the conversation back to that particular subject. It must have been sometime after you guys left Konoha. Even though there was steam rising from the water which obscured their vision slightly, the girls could see the blush on the tribesman's face. It was during one of the celebrations in Ba Sing Se after the war had ended. He answered shortly. Oh, come on, you can't just leave it at that. He's right. We need a little more than that. Choji agreed with him. Sokka looked over at his fellow paragon, who only shook his head. No, you're the one who opened his mouth. The blonde told him. All right, fine. It was my first time drinking like an adult, and I was new to the experience. So I was a little tipsy and stupid when I ran into Suki, who was probably as equally as tipsy. We started talking, and the next thing I know, he trailed off. The 2 of you were in a room alone together? Kiba prodded. No. I told her what I saw in the desert, when Choji and I drank some of the cactus juice. Shikamaru opened his eyes and looked at him. You don't mean... Yep, I told her I thought I saw the Kyoshi warriors doing a group striptease. He answered simply. How are you not dead? Choji asked, curious about it. He was fairly certain that any man would have been buried in the ground after telling something like that to a girl. If I remember correctly, the only thing Suki said in response was if I wanted a private show. And before we knew it, he left it hanging, even though it was obvious what had happened. All the girls, including Hinata, were looking at Suki, who felt a little uncomfortable by the stares. Way to go, girl. June told her with a grin. She just blushed and avoided eye contact. So you're the only one of us who's actually done it? Niji asked for clarification. No, he's not. Naruto told him, getting their attention. To most of the people listening in on the conversation, that was a surprise. You? Asked Kiba. When did that happen? He could not believe that the knucklehead blonde he once knew had actually done the deed. When I was 12, he answered simply. What? What? Shouted most of the guys as they just stared at the blonde. That was an even bigger surprise. The girls would have said it too, if they wanted to be found out. You mean it happened when you were still living in Konoha? Choji demanded. It's not that big a deal, he told them, trying to wave it off. No, you're not getting off that easily, Naruto. Spill, Niji ordered him. He heaved a sigh, but compiled. It was after we had passed the bell test. After I was freed from the robes, I ran right to the meat bar to tell them all the good news. They were happy for me and decided to throw a bit of a party. At the end of the party, someone suggested that since I was now technically an adult, I should be shown the adult way of having fun. Everyone else agreed and I was given a through explanation in the adult way of having fun. Ironically enough, I don't remember who the one who took my virginity actually was. How could you not know? Kiba demanded. Not unless. The Inuzuka clan heir trailed off when he realized the implications of what the blonde was saying. He shrugged. I think the number was around 9 or 10. I wasn't sure, considering they took turns. Of course, there was more than one who shared a turn. Well, that explains the next day when you came to training with a shit-eating grin. Sasuke remarked. No one had really asked why he had such a grin on his face that day. Did you know about this? Sakura demanded of Azula, turning to look at her. Of course I did, he told me while we were on the mission. She replied easily. Oh, I hope he gives some details. Ino said with her eye still attached to the peephole. Do you remember anything that happened? Sokka asked his teammate. Of course I do. He replied, standing up and stretching a little. But I'm not inclined to tell you guys, mostly because we're being peeked on by female perverts. He shouted the last part at the wall separating the springs. That caught both the guys, except for Sokka, and the girls by surprise. What? They're spying on us? Kiba yelped in surprise. While he was a little flattered, it was still weird. No, we're not. Ino shouted as the girls tried to make their way back to the water. Don't bother trying. Naruto told them loudly, making them stop in their tracks. Both me and Sokka knew you were watching right from the get-go. He looked up to the sky. You get everything you need? He asked to seemingly no one in particular. Yeah, I did. Jiraiya's voice came back from outside the hot springs walls. I've got enough to know it's true. Eek! Shouted Ino. There's a pervert peeping on us. She was trying to flip the blame onto the Toad Sage, but only got laughing in response. Nothing of the sort, Ino, he told her. I was outside with my back to the wall the entire time. Oh, and by the way, I've known about those holes long before any of you were born. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go give this information to a couple of people. Like who? Tenten asked, incredibly nervous. Where else would I go? To the newspaper. He declared before getting out of there. Ino, Sakura, Suki, and Azula all shared a look of horror when they heard what he had said. Stop him! Sakura shouted as she ran back into the changing room. The others followed and after quickly dressing, chased after him. But since he had a good head start on them, they were going to be too late. The next morning, the front of the Konoha newspaper had this for a headliner. Urban legend proven true. Female perverts exist. Chapter 60, Sad News and Odd News. Location, Naruto. He waited in silence, sitting on the couch in the house. He had changed into a black outfit. Hearing the door to the bedroom close, he looked behind to see Azula striding towards him in clothes similar to his, only in white. Silently, he stood up and together, they walked out of the house. The day outside was partly cloudy, casting shadows around them. The rest of their team stood at the base of the tree. With the exception of Jiraiya, they all wore the same white outfit that Azula wore. Jiraiya, like Naruto, wore it in the color of black instead. Both Nyla and Akela had left behind since they weren't exactly needed for what was going to happen. In silence, they walked through the streets of Konoha. Despite of what they were going to, the day and the people didn't look any different. Children still ran around and played. Adults still walked the streets, going somewhere that was important to them. Ship owners still took care of their stores and sold their wares. It was a normal day for them, although some of them would probably not feel that way when they heard what had happened later. They kept on walking in silence, the ground crunching beneath their heels. As they walked, members of the Konoha 11 quietly joined them. No greetings were exchanged, they just kept walking. The people in the street gave way to them, stepping aside as they walked past. When they finally came to a stop, they stood outside the Konoha cemetery. They saw Kurenai standing nearby the gate leading into the cemetery, the black outfit hiding the bump she was carrying. "Do you guys want some time alone with her?" Saka quietly asked Shikamaru and his teammates. Ino shook her head quietly. "Thank you, but there's no need for that," she told him. "You're sure?" "Sure." Suki asked. "There isn't anything to say that she hasn't already heard," Choji said to them. He and his teammates walked up to her. Together, they headed into the cemetery. The other Konoha members followed them, and so did Teen Paragon. As they passed through the gate, they couldn't help but remember the day they had gotten the news. Flashback. It was the day after the hot springs incident. The newspapers were everyone and the guys couldn't help but laugh every time they saw one. "It's not funny." Ino all but shouted at them after they saw one guy pass them with the newspaper in hand and kept looking at women in surprise. "Yes, it is," Saka said from where he and Naruto leaned against a fence, Akela at his feet. "It's incredibly funny." "How?" asked Tenten. "How is this incredibly funny?" Her teammates kept their mouths shut. They both knew if they gave a bad answer and made her mad, she was liable to start throwing things, and she rarely missed. "What a drag," Shikamaru said to himself. "It's funny because for all your accusations of us peeking on you, you've been doing it to us and for a long time. It's just nice to see the tables turned," he told the girls. "Yes. From now on, men will be calling women perverts," Sasuke said with a smirk. Even though both he and Sakura were there, Naruto was doing his best to ignore them. Even though the three of them didn't know it, there was now a pool on how long it would take before things would come to a head. "It'll be nice to be able to accuse the girls instead of them accusing us," Kiba noted with a grin. "Don't get ahead of yourselves, this won't last long," Ino promised them. "Things will be back to the way they were." "What you mean where women would pick on guys and accuse them of doing it instead?" Azula asked with barely concealed sarcasm. "Forgive me if I have a hard time believing you on that. All we have to do now is find the female version of FS Sensei, and this will be permanent," Naruto remarked as he pulled out a cigarette. He held it between his lips as he fished around his pockets for his lighter. "Do you want some help?" his girlfriend asked him. He shook his head. "You're my girlfriend, Azula, not my personal lighter." When he finally found the lighter, he gave a pleased sound at his small triumph. Just as he was about to use it, they heard the sound of a shinobi landing on the ground. Looking over at where the sound came from, he saw Jiraiya coming towards them. "Hey, we were just talking about you," he said in greeting as he tried to get a light. Jiraiya didn't say anything in reply, his face uncharacteristically grim and solemn. "I've been looking for you three," he told Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino. "We've received some bad news from Yukigakure." "What happened?" Shikamaru asked him, hoping it wasn't what he thought it was. His face grew more solemn. "I'm sorry, but Asuma Sarutobi has been killed." Everyone stared at him in shock and disbelief. Naruto's arm fell to his side, the lighter cold in his hand. End flashback. As the funeral bells rang in the distance, they stood around the new headstone that told of them of where Asuma now rested. Resting on top of the headstone was a picture of the man, smiling confidently. Even though tears were shed freely, no one said a word. It was still hard to believe that it had happened. All they knew was that the shinobi who were dispatched to Yukigakure was finishing up their mission when Asuma was attacked and killed. All the evidence they needed was a piece of paper that was on the ground next to Asuma. On it was a single red cloud. Now the shinobi in Yukigakure were staying longer, in order to find out who was responsible, and to ensure that there was no one else. It had been a week since the news came to them, but it didn't really sink in until they received Asuma's body the day before. "I still can't believe that he's gone," Saka said mostly to himself. During the time he had known the shinobi, he respected him as a warrior and a teacher, able to keep the peace between his students, knowing when he had to be firm and when not to. Suki overheard her boyfriend and took hold of his hand, squeezing it lightly. He was a good man, she told him. She hadn't really known Asuma before coming to Konoha, but she could tell that much about him. And now he's a dead man, June remarked, earning a few glares from those who heard her. "We're at his funeral, June. Have some decency," Sakura hissed at the bounty hunter. "I'm just telling the truth," she replied. She did respect the dead shinobi, but she wasn't one to wallow in grief, especially about someone she didn't know all that well. "Besides, I'm the kind of person who'll mourn someone I lost with a drink and a toast." "I see." It was obvious that she didn't, but she wasn't going to push the subject. If June had a different way of mourning someone, that was fine by her. She then took a quick look over at Naruto. Ever since that morning, the blonde wore one expression on his face. All one could see on it was that of strict neutrality. "We are here to remember and honor the life of Asuma Sarutobi," Tsunade said from where she stood in the front of the crowd. "He was a fine shinobi who had served 3 of the Hokages, including me. He had also served the fire daimyo as one of his guardians. He was a good man who will be missed, especially by those who were close to him." It was a short speech, but she was acting as a leader speaking of a subordinate, not a friend. "Does anyone wish to share anything about him one last time?" she asked the crowd. "I do," Kurenai said, stepping forward. "I remember the first time the two of us actually went out. Everyone kept assuming that we were together when we weren't. We kept trying to people that we weren't, but they didn't believe us. Finally, when I was about to suggest that we stay away from each other, he asked me if I wanted to try and see if what they were talking about made any sense." She smiled sadly as her hand drifted down to her stomach. "I guess they were right after all. I remember one time in the academy," Jinma said, speaking up. A fight had started up when the teacher was out of the room. Things were about to get ugly when Asuma stepped in between the two groups. He patiently listened to the two sides and then figured out the problem. In the end, he managed to diffuse the tension in the room by cracking a joke that made everyone laugh. He smiled at the memory. He always managed to do that. Until he had told us otherwise, we all believed that he would end up Hokage someday. This continued on for a good bit of time. People would step forward and tell a tale of Asuma before stepping back. Some of the stories made the crowd chuckle, and some made them smile. Finally, the last story was for his students to give. When all the eyes fell on them, Ino stepped forward. "The memory of Asuma-sensei that stands out the most to me was when we first met him," she told them. "Yeah, there's no doubt about that," Choji agreed, stepping forward as well. He took a quick look at Shikamaru, who stayed behind and stayed silent. Deciding not to ask him to tell the tale as well, the Akimichi clan heir continued. "He took us out of the academy and sat us down on a nearby bench. With a cigarette in his mouth, he introduced himself and told us that he wasn't going to go easy on us now that we were shinobi. When he saw that we had started to cry, he said that there wasn't any need for us to do that, saying all he had done at that point was barely threatening. Shikamaru immediately told him off, telling him it was the smoke from his cigarette. It was stinging our eyes. The story made everyone there laugh. It was typical of Asuma to do that. He had often forgotten that the smoke from his cigarettes would sting the eyes of people who weren't used to them. The laughs died as both Choji and Ino stepped back into the crowd. Silently, one by one, they stepped up to the headstone, bowed their heads, and placed the flowers they carried on and around it. Soon, the grave would be covered in them but would be removed within a few hours. If people saw that, it would be heart-rending. That was why it was done during the night. The crowd began to trickle away from the cemetery as the funeral ended, leaving through the gate and then spreading out through the streets. The only people who stayed at the grave were Kurenai and Asuma's students. No one begrudged them that last quiet moment. As Team Paragon walked out onto the street, they saw someone that made Naruto inwardly cringe. Danzo stood in the street, looking straight at them. When he began to walk forward towards them, they stopped. "How are you holding up, Naruto?" he asked the blonde, stopping just in front of him. "Shouldn't you be asking that question to Kurenai, Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino?" Naruto asked, avoiding direct eye contact with him. In the back of his mind, a small voice was telling him to run, to hide away from the man in front of him. It was taking everything he had not to obey that voice. "It is you I am concerned for, not them. You are a lot more important in the long run than they are," he said bluntly. The people around him scowled at him for saying such a thing, at the tail end of a funeral of all things, but he ignored them. "You make it sound like I'm coming back once this is all done." "I'm not," the blonde said firmly, glaring at him. "That has yet to be decided. I don't believe that you would turn your back so easily on the place that raised you, gave you clothes to wear on your back, food to eat, and a bed to sleep in. It is not easy to betray the village that trained you to be a shinobi. Funny, I found it quite easy the first time, considering the village didn't exactly do a very good job of training me," he retorted, clenching his hands into fists, making them shake slightly. Somehow, the man's words echoed in his mind, casting a small seed of doubt in his beliefs. Danzo took notice of the shaking fists and smiled slightly. Without saying anything, he turned around and walked away from them. He kept on walking, moving away from the funeral. If he was sad about anything, it was that Konoha had lost a fine shinobi. Asuma may have been Hiruzen's son, but he saw him as a shinobi first, and the child of his former friend second. Once he was a good distance away from the cemetery, he turned around to face those who had been following him. "Is there something you require?" he asked his Hokage and her teammate. "Danzo, you were told to stay away from Naruto," Jiraiya said to him, anger clearly showing on his face. "I remember," he replied calmly. "But can I not be worried about how a former charge of mine is feeling when someone he knows has died? Naruto was never your charge. You were training him to be your tool," Tsunade accused him. It looked like she was restraining herself from throwing a punch at him. "I was training him to be a shinobi. It was obvious that he was going to need careful guidance from the moment he was born. By beating him and telling him how worthless he was every time he read or wrote something wrong. Do you have any idea what that is like to a child? We're lucky that he didn't kill himself." Her voice rose, but she wasn't shouting yet. "It wouldn't have gone to that," he told her calmly. If there was one thing he learned in all his years as a shinobi, it was never good to lose your temper. A loss of temper led to rash things. I would not have let the village's Jinchuriki kill himself over a petty reason such as that. Both Jiraiya and Tsunade snarled at his words but didn't move attack him. "He's not your tool, Danzo," Jiraiya repeated. "Neither is he yours. If I remember correctly, he left you two behind as well when he betrayed the village." While Tsunade flinched at his words, Jiraiya remained confident. "If that was true, he wouldn't have accepted me as his sensei again, would he?" the Toad Sage asked. "Stay away from him, Danzo," he ordered before turning around and leaving with Tsunade. He would have walked away as well had he not seen the girl who was apparently the Jinchuriki's girlfriend. "And what do you want?" he asked. He wasn't sure if she had arrived with Tsunade and Jiraiya or not. But that was not important. I think it would be best for your health if you stayed away from Naruto like they suggested. She told him, walking closer to him. And why should I do that? He asked her, not showing any emotion. Because the next time you come anywhere near him, I will burn you to ashes. She threatened him, bending a small ball of fire into her hand to emphasize her point. How interesting, he remarked with a small smirk appearing on his mouth. You seem to be under the impression that you will succeed in that endeavor. If I can't, I'll just get some of my friends to help me. Maybe they'll hold you down as I put a bolt of lightning through your heart. She replied, still holding the ball of fire in her hand. If that's supposed to scare me, you will have to try harder than that. He told her, never losing his cool. I have faced enemies that would have terrified you just by being in the same room. There's nothing you could say that would scare me. I was not trying to scare you, I was making a promise. She extinguished the ball of fire. Stay away from Naruto, and I'll let you live. The next time you feel like getting close to him, please think about how it would feel being slowly burned alive or having a lightning bolt pass through your heart, killing you in one stroke. She walked away from him. As he watched her disappear from his sight, he smiled slightly. He had to give her credit. Many would have blustered more or even falter when looking at his dispassionate eyes. But she didn't. She held her ground and told him what would happen if he continued. In a way, it reminded him of the day Hiruzen confronted him. Flashback. Danzo! Roared Hiruzen as he stormed into the room, Jiraiya close behind him. Both had looks of anger upon their faces, but it was the one on Hiruzen's face that unnerved him. What is it? He asked from where he sat. He could see that both of them were furious just by their stances, and how they seemed to fill the small room that was his office. We've managed to locate Naruto. Jiraiya told him, his teeth clenched. Oh, that is good. Where was he? Out on the streets, where he had been living for a week, after he ran away from the orphanage that you own. Hiruzen answered. This is odd, considering that wasn't the orphanage I had originally put him in. There was an accusatory tone in each of his words. It was clear that he knew what that meant. Even if it did, Danzo tried to play it cool. Are you sure about that, Hiruzen? It's possible that you mixed up the orphanages and gave him to mine. It does happen, even with. Don't fuck with us. Jiraiya roared, cutting him off. We know the truth. Jiraiya. Hiruzen barked, making the Toad Sage stop. He didn't look at back his student. Instead, he focused on who he thought was his friend. Naruto told me of what you were doing to him. I was teaching him how to read and write. Danzo replied. And beating him with your cane and telling him he was worthless when he got something wrong. He said in return. You don't think I wouldn't tell what you were trying to do to him? I was trying him to be a shinobi. You were training him to be one of your root shinobi. He countered. Have you forgotten what Minato asked of us? He wanted Naruto to be seen as a hero. And I am doing exactly that. I am training him to be the ideal shinobi, by having his emotions removed. The next thing he knew, he was struck in the face by an iron pole. He landed face down on the floor. Before he could even try to move, he was flipped over, and he saw the end of a staff directly over his face. He also felt a kunai at his throat. Not anymore, you aren't. Hiruzen told him, holding the staff while Jiraiya held the kunai. For the sake of our supposed friendship, I'm going to give you only one warning, Danzo. If you ever come near Naruto again, you are dead. Are we clear? He could only stifle a gulp as he looked into Hiruzen's eyes. This was the Hokage who protected the village. This was the man who stood for everyone in Konoha, even from those inside it. Yes, we are. He answered. It was the only thing he could say. End flashback. They are quite protective of him. He mused quietly to himself as he walked away. He probably would have been like that too, if he was a friend to the blonde, and was made of less sterner stuff. But he wasn't, his first loyalty was to the village, and that was all that mattered. And in the end, they'll thank me for what I've done. He doesn't even know it, but I've secured his loyalty. He thought in triumph as he walked down an alleyway, disappearing into its shadows. Location, Toby. He stood at a nearby window, watching as the rain poured down from the sky and hammered against the window pane. He was remembering Kisame and his life. In a way, the blue-skinned shinobi had been his closest confidant, one might even say friend. While the loss was not as great as ones he had suffered in his past, it was still a hard one. But still, despite Kisame's death, he was overly concerned with it. It didn't matter in the long run. Once the plan was completed, he would be able to see him again, along with Asuma and all those that had to die or had died because it was necessary. The memories of what occurred in Yukigakure were still fresh in his mind. Flashback. The side of a wall burst open as Asuma flew through it. He crashed into the ground, rolling for a brief second before stopping. Blood seeped out from a wound in his side, and he was fairly certain that one of his ankles was twisted. One of his trench knives lay nearby. If he could get to it, he would better off against his attacker. Don't even think about it. A snarling voice told him as the dual-colored form of Zetsu followed him out of the ruined wall. You won't make it to it. Besides, what good would it do you? Another voice from Zetsu asked. When this voice, he could see the mouth on the white side of the creature move. You don't know that. Asuma told him as he mentally calculated both the distance to the trench knife and the time it would take to get to it. He may not, but I do. Toby said as he came out of the wall as well. Don't try to reach for the trench knife, Asuma. You won't make it. He wasn't playing the idiot he usually played. Instead, he was the serious and cold leader of the Akatsuki. He considered it for another moment, but then dropped his shoulders in defeat. I guess I won't. He looked up at the two who had caught him by surprise and fought him. You're going to kill me, aren't you? He asked quietly. Yes, I am. The masked Akatsuki member answered. Why? He could feel himself getting woozy from the loss of blood, but he wanted to know why the man and creature standing over him decided to do this. Because the playing field has to be leveled, he told him in complete seriousness. That doesn't make any sense. He protested. Only because you don't know the scale of what has happened, the snarling voice of Zetsu told him. Your lot took one of ours, so we take one of yours with interest. The hate coming from his voice was almost palpable. Enough, Zetsu, Toby ordered him, his tone never changing. He will soon be dead, there is no need to tell him such things. They will make no sense to him anyway. Just who are you anyway? Asuma demanded as he tried to move, making more blood seep out of his wound. Why are you so afraid that you would hide behind a mask? If there was one thing he wanted to know, it was who was behind that mask. He looked at the Konoha shinobi for what seemed to be a long moment before turning to face Zetsu. Leave us. He ordered. The creature didn't protest, he simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the ground as he went. When he was sure Zetsu was gone, the masked shinobi faced Asuma once again. He reached up and took off his mask, lifting it gently over his head. When he saw who it was, Asuma's eyes went wide in shock and disbelief. That's impossible, you were dead. He protested. They said you were dead. They didn't know I lived. The now unmasked Akatsuki member answered simply. But why would you do this? Why would you betray us? I had originally planned to come back, but on the way, I came across something that made me lose faith in this reality. When those words were spoken, he somehow knew what he meant. Oh Kami, you saw her die, didn't you? With my own two eyes, he confirmed as he put the mask back on and pulled out a kunai, kneeling down so they were almost face to face. Goodbye, Asuma Sarutobi. He said before plunging the kunai into the Konoha shinobi's heart. Asuma only gave a small grunt in recognition of what happened. Then his eyes fell dead, and he slumped forward. Toby left the kunai in his heart and rose back up. Out of his sleeve, he pulled out a single piece of paper and let it fall to the ground. He then leapt to the top of a nearby building and waited in silence. He stayed like through the rest of the night, almost like he was waiting in vigil. When the morning came and Asuma's body was found, he disappeared. End flashback. What are you thinking of? The white part of Zetsu asked as he came into the room. Nothing that concerns you, Zetsu, he said without turning to face him. Has it been sent? Yeah, he should be getting it any time now. The black part of Zetsu answered. But was it really necessary to send it to him? The white part asked. Even though he did exactly as I wanted, he and his little team damaged us by doing more than that. For that, I must both congratulate and punish them. He had them where he wanted them, and he would not allow any misstep to happen. Was really necessary to kill the others as well? The white part asked him. Is that doubt I hear from you, Zetsu? He asked in return. While his tone was only questioning, those who knew him would have been able to hear the dangerous undercurrent in it. They now had to tread lightly and be careful with their answers. It's curiosity. The black part told him. It's not like you to kill those who weren't in your way, Toby. Do you not realize how much of a setback we now have because of Kisame's loss? It'll now take longer for us to seal away the remaining Biju. Kakuzu was an acceptable loss, Kisame wasn't. He explained. By taking out the others, we not only pay them back, we also harm them emotionally as well. Oh, I see now. The white part said in realization. You truly are devious, Toby. The black part told the masked shinobi. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked out at the rain, falling from the sky. What I do to rid ourselves of this useless reality. He said quietly. If Zetsu had heard him, he didn't say anything. Location, Konoha Cemetery. Shikamaru still stood in front of Asuma's grave. Kurenai, Ino, and Choji had already left, but he stayed. It had been well over 2 hours since the funeral's end and yet, it didn't feel like that to him. He still couldn't believe that Asuma was dead. It felt like a bad dream that he couldn't wake up from. He heard footsteps walking up behind him, but he didn't do anything to acknowledge it. I thought you would still be here. Naruto remarked as he walked up beside Shikamaru. The blonde had changed out of the mourning clothes he had been given and back into his normal ones. There was a stark contrast between the two of them, and yet, they said nothing about it. Hey, Naruto, he greeted quietly, still focused on the grave. Is there something you need? No. I don't need anything right now. You on the other hand, you definitely need to stop moping around here. He pulled out a cigarette and stuck it in his mouth. You want one? He asked, holding out the pack. Why are you here, Naruto? Shikamaru asked him again, being blunt with him as he ignored the pack of cigarettes. I'm here to help you get past this. He replied, being just as blunt. You can't stay here. You're likely to get dragged away from here when night falls. What would you want me to do? I couldn't protect my own sensei. You weren't there, Shikamaru. The blonde told him. His tone was firm, but it didn't look the heir to the Nara clan heard it. I should have been. He offered a place on the mission for me, and I refused, saying it was too troublesome. His voice was filled with bitterness when he remembered those words. Let me guess, he just laughed, said that was just like you, and didn't bring the subject up again? It sounded like the man when it came to him and Shikamaru. Yeah, he did just that. He said he understood, and then we went back to our game. It was their last game of shogi and he thought nothing of it at the time. Still, the fact remains that you weren't there and so, there was nothing you could have done. Naruto reminded him. The cigarette still hung in his mouth, still unlit. I could have been there. But you weren't. Standing here wishing that you were there, and that you could have saved isn't going to do anything. Odds are that either you would have died in his place, or you both would be dead. He looked at the blonde with anger and rage in his eyes. What the hell would you know, Naruto? What would you know about the pain of losing someone? What would know of the feeling that you won't ever see them again? You don't know anything. You don't the right to say anything. He shouted. As he listened to the tirade, Naruto's eye went flat and hard. When it was over, he took the still unlit cigarette from his mouth and held it in his hand. Tell me, Shikamaru. He began. How many people have you lost in combat since you became a shinobi? Oh, that's right. He cut off the clan heir before he could even speak. You've lost just the one. Do you know how many people I've lost since I left and fought in the 100-Year War? How many who were living one moment and dead the next? How many I probably sent to their deaths? How many I killed myself so they wouldn't have to suffer? He took a step forward, getting into Shikamaru's personal space. I've lost count. If there is anyone who doesn't know anything or have the right to say anything, it's you. The last part of the sentence seemed to echo throughout the cemetery. Taking a step back, he put the cigarette back in his mouth and took out his lighter. Lighting the cigarette and taking a drag, he felt himself calm down. After a minute of silence between the two, Shikamaru finally spoke. Sorry, Naruto, I was out of line. He apologized. He had honestly forgotten the fact that Naruto fought in a war in his rage. It was obvious that the blonde would have lost people in the war. Yeah, not one of your brightest moments, he remarked as he took another drag. After another moment of silence, he held out the pack again. You sure you don't want one? You know what? I will take one. He took one of the cigarettes and put it in his mouth. Naruto held up his lighter and lit it, offering the light to him. He took it, lighting the end of his cigarette and took a drag. Almost immediately, he began to cough. How do you people do this? He demanded. How nostalgic, the blonde mused silently to himself. It takes a little practice. Try going slower on the next drag. He suggested, repeating the words that Jiraiya had told him. Shikamaru did as he was told. They stood in silence as he figured it out. Asuma was a good man. The blonde finally said. And a good sensei, Shikamaru agreed. How do you move past this kind of pain? If there was someone who could answer that question and give him a good, straight answer, it was Naruto. I'm not sure you can move past it, I never could. He admitted honestly. But there are ways to deal with it. You could share the grief with other people. Like Kurenai-sensei, Ino, and Choji? He asked for clarification. Yeah, like them. Personally, I always found when that doesn't work, the simplest approach does, at least for me. What's that? Just find a quiet spot and scream. He could only stare at the blonde. Are you serious? Naruto nodded. You'd be amazed at how helpful it is. And if I remember correctly, we're not that far from the forest, right? He turned around and walked away from the grave. About halfway to the gate, he stopped and turned back around. One more thing, Shikamaru, he said. What? You may think that as your life goes on, you'll forget about him. But he won't be. He smiled and tapped the back of his head. He'll always be there, in the back of your mind. He'll be there, in the form of your memories of him, the good times, the bad, each and every single one of them. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse. But he's still there. Don't ever forget that. He turned back around and walked out of the cemetery. Shikamaru stood there for a few more minutes. Then he turned around and walked over to the edge of the cemetery and leapt for the trees. He sprinted through the branches, going deeper and deeper into the forest surrounding Konoha. The cigarette fell from his mouth at some point, but he didn't care, it was already done anyway. He landed in a small, quiet clearing, a good distance away from the village. He sank to his knees as his emotions began to rise up from where he held them down. He tried to force them down, but his memories of Asuma kept making them come back up. Finally, he took Naruto's advice. He lifted his head and screamed. Naruto had finished his cigarette just after he had left the cemetery. He wasn't a chain smoker by any means, but today's events warranted another round. He was in the midst of pulling out the pack when a young boy ran up to him. "Mr. Naruto?" he asked. "Yeah," he answered shortly, putting away the pack. "Letter for you, sir," the boy said, holding the letter out for him to take. He was hesitant to take it. The letter itself was plain and uninteresting. That made it all the more suspicious to him. "Who's it from?" he asked as he finally took the letter, holding it gingerly. "Don't know, sir," the boy answered honestly. "I was just told to get it to you as quick as I could." He held out his hand, like he was expecting something. Naruto knew what he wanted. He reached into his pocket, pulled out some money and slapped it into the boy's hand. He closed his hand and took off, not bothering to look at the money he had been given. He would later realize that Naruto had given him twice the usual tipping amount, leaving the blonde alone with the letter. He walked over to a nearby wall and leaned against. Opening the letter, he began to silently read it. By the time he was done, his face held a furious gaze and began to openly swear. It was an empty he was swearing to, so no one heard him. Ironically enough, it was the swearing that led Jiraiya to him. "There you are," the Toad Sage said as he came around the corner. He was about to say more when he noticed both the letter and the swearing. "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. Naruto stopped swearing to look at him. "Read this," he practically ordered, shoving the letter into his hands. He took the letter and began to read. "To the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. I must congratulate you and your team on a job well done. You must be quite skilled to be able to take out Kakuzu. But then again, I was hoping you would do just that. Now, there's no need to look surprised. Did you think I wouldn't know about it? I was the one who convinced Kakuzu to start going to the underground auction. I knew it would pay off in the long run. And so it did. You've ridded me of a person who could have been most troublesome if he had lived to see the endgame. And please, don't let his self-conceived title let you believe things. He was by no means our treasurer. However, you have caused me a slight hindrance by killing Kisame. He was not supposed to be there. Normally, I wouldn't care if he was there or not. But there's the small issue of you killing him, and allowing the Kiri team you were working with to take Samahata. You have stepped out of line and for that, I am forced to punish you. I assume that by the time you are reading this letter, Asuma Sarutobi has arrived in Konoha. I would have loved to have been at the funeral, but I had pressing matters elsewhere. Now normally, that would have been all I would do to you. However, since you have disrupted my plan, I am forced to be a bit more thorough in punishing you. I'm afraid the life of Jiraiya's old fishing friend had to be taken also, as well as the owner of that club you used to find out where the underground auction was. You will be probably confused by what I did, but Jiraiya knows and he can tell you. But there is a way for you all to see them again. All you would have to do is surrender yourself to the Akatsuki. You would help us free the world from the reality it lives. If you will not, then so be it. Just remember this, you have been dancing to my tune ever since you accepted the first mission after coming back. The fact that you killed Kisame is a misstep, and looked what it cost you. Sincerely, Toby of the Akatsuki. By the time he was done reading the letter, his hands were dangerously close to ripping the thing to shreds. Damn him. He snarled. Damn him. Those two had nothing to do with this. They helped us, I guess that makes them fair game in his eyes. Naruto replied, just as angry. Jiraiya, I know that Ryoshi was a close friend of yours, but I need to know, who was the owner of that club to you? He fell silent for a brief moment before finally speaking. She was my daughter. The bastard killed my daughter. He didn't bother to look over and see the look of horror dawn on Naruto's face, replacing the anger. I'm sorry, Jiraiya," he said. It was the only thing he felt he could say at that point. While he may have lost people he knew, he had never lost his own child. Kami take that man to an early grave. He swore. It's like he knows lesson number 9, and is using it to taunt us. What is lesson number 9? The Toad Sage asked him. He had heard the blonde say it many times before, along with the other 8 lessons, almost like they were a mantra. But he never actually asked what the 9th lesson was, mostly because it either slipped his mind or something interrupted them. Lesson number 9, there is always someone better. He recited. That was the lesson which also served as a warning, and only an idiot would ignore it. I see. It made sense to Jiraiya, seeing as he had several years of experience to back the lesson up. In any case, I didn't come here so we could rage over a letter. Our team has been called into a meeting with Tsunade. We're needed there, ASAP. I understand. A mission would help them ignore what the letter had told them. Especially the parts about how they were duped and what it cost them for going the extra step. But what do we do about this? He held up the letter. Burn it. Nobody, except for the 2 of us and Tsunade, needs to know about what this letter contains. The blonde nodded in agreement. Pulling out his lighter, he held it under the paper and lit it. Waiting carefully, the letter soon caught fire. He flung it into the air. They watched as the letter floated down to the ground, burning to ashes as it fell. Once it was fully burned, Naruto scattered the ashes with a few swift kicks. There, he said with a tone of finality as he looked at Jiraiya. Let's go. As they walked into the office of the Hokage, they both noticed that the rest of the team, with the exception of Nyla, was already there. What took you so long? Tsunade demanded as they fell in. I was talking to Shikamaru. He needed it. Naruto answered shortly. What's this all about? We just received a messenger hawk from Kumo. The Reikage wants us to send a group of Konoha shinobi there to talk about possible trade agreements. Let me guess, he wants a Hyuga to come as well? He asked with a roll of his eyes. Actually, no, he doesn't. The message was coded. What it really said that is the Reikage, at the request of his brother, has asked for you personally to come to Kumo. That raised questioning eyebrows from everyone on the team, except for Jiraiya, who already guessed the reason. What for? Asked the blonde. To train you, she told him. Why would the Reikage's brother want to train me? Something was a little fishy about the whole thing. He just wasn't sure what it was. It's because the Reikage's brother is like you, Naruto. Jiraiya told him, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The only difference is that he has full control over his Biju. And there's what it is. He thought to himself. But why does he want to train me? We're not even from the same village. And while he would like to consider the other Jinchuriki to be his family, he didn't know the guy. Perhaps he recognized the danger the Akatsuki present and wants to make sure that you survive it as well. Azula suggested. Maybe he feels a certain kinship with you, and wants to actually meet you. Sokka suggested. It kinda made sense to the tribesmen, considering that they carried the same burden. It doesn't matter in the end. You're leaving in an hour. Tsunade told them. This is a top-secret mission. No one outside of this office is to know what you have heard. Naruto stifled a sigh. I'm guessing that I have no choice in the matter? He asked, already knowing the answer. He and his team were supposed to only have missions concerning the Akatsuki. The last time he checked, going to train in a different village did not qualify as that kind mission. But he could also see why they wanted him to go. None, she said, her tone final. All of you pack for an extended leave away from the village. She told all of them. You are dismissed. They acknowledged the dismissal by giving her brief nods. As they left the office, she noticed a small piece of paper on the edge of her desk. As the door closed behind them, she opened the piece of paper and read what it held. When she was done, her face was set in an angry scowl. She crumpled the paper up, tore it to shreds, and then threw them into a nearby trash can. Pulling out one of the desk's drawers, she took out a small bottle of sake and a cup. Wordlessly, she poured the drink into the cup and drained it in one shot. It was just the first of several she had that night before she called it quits. Chapter 61, New Place and Impromptu Lessons. Location, Team Paragon. They had arrived in Kumo just a few scant hours ago, and were settling into their rooms at the hotel when someone knocked on the door. When Jiraiya went to open it, they found a Kumo shinobi standing outside. "Can I help you?" The Toad Sage asked him. "Are you the team from Konoha?" he asked in return. "Yes. Lord Reikage wants to see you immediately." "Right now?" asked Sokka. "We just got here." The last day of traveling was spent hiking up the mountains surrounding the hidden village. During the hike, he began to really feel that Appa and the days of flying past the mountains were gone, which made him miss them even more. "Those are his orders," the Kumo shinobi told him with an almost uncaring tone of voice. The tribesman almost wanted to punch him, but didn't because he knew it would have been grounds for a fight. That was the last thing any of them wanted to have at this point. "Thank you, we'll be there presently," Jiraiya assured him before closing the door. "You heard the man," he told the rest of the team. "Let's move it." No one groaned or said a word. They just put whatever it was they were holding and walked out of the room. As they walked out of the hotel, the Kumo shinobi fell in beside them. He didn't say anything, but they knew he was there to make sure they got to the Reikage and nowhere else. As they walked through the streets, the difference between Konoha and Kumo couldn't have been more different. While Konoha looked like a village that grew and had things added on over time, Kumo looked like its buildings were either carved out of or built into the mountains. It looked like every roof of a building was a platform to be used. If some of the members of Team Paragon were honest, it kinda looked like upside mushrooms on a mountain atop of each other. Below each and every roof were multiple glass panes that, from a distance, looked like they were all one window. If they looked straight up, they could see clouds passing or encircling the mountains. "Either Toph or Aang would love it here," Sokka stated as he looked around. Aang would love it for the feeling that he was almost at the same elevation of the air temples. Toph would love it for the ample amount of earth surrounding her. I can almost see Aang leaping off one of the high spots on the mountain and flying through the air laughing. Suki reminisced with a fond smile. The monk always seemed happy when he was gliding through the air. "Funny, I can almost see us throwing him over the edge without his gilder staff after he did something stupid," June remarked with a small smirk. Both Sokka and Naruto couldn't help but smirk along with her, showing their agreement. "That's a little harsh of you, June," Jiraiya told her. "It's not like he'd be killed by it," Sokka said in reply with a shrug of his shoulders. "All Aang would have to do is either bend the air beneath him into a cushion to soften his landing, or bend the earth to rise up and catch him. Besides, FS-sensei, we both know that the first word either of us thinks when it comes to Aang is not Avatar. Naruto said, joining the conversation. "Fair enough," the Toad Sage conceded. He may have been one of the last people on the team to meet the person in question, but he saw it just as well. "What's the first word you guys think of?" Suki asked. The first word she thought of when thinking of Aang was goofy. "Idiot," the rest of the team, minus Sokka, chorused as one. "Now that's harsh," she declared. "Suki, if I had joined the group just after Aang had been freed, he would soon have a permanent red imprint of my hand on the back of his head," Naruto told her. "And it would be from the number of times I've slapped him there for his stupidity. That entire journey to the North Pole and past that would have been a lot shorter if someone had actually tried to curb his idiocy. And curb Katara too," Sokka added a little reluctantly. He didn't want to admit it, but there had been times when his sister had encouraged the stupidity or started it herself. But in fairness, if it wasn't for Aang's stupidity, we wouldn't have gone to Kyoshi Island and met Suki. He pointed out. That's a fair point. The blonde conceded. But still, we would have skipped a lot of places that you didn't really need to go to. But you didn't know about him being released. Suki pointed out. Suki, trust me, if we knew that Aang was to be released, Naruto would have been there. Azula assured the Kyoshi warrior. Whether it would have been her orders or Ozai's, Naruto would have been there. What happened next would have been up for grabs. It doesn't matter in the end. June said, stopping Suki's incoming remark. What's happened has happened. You weren't there and Aang doesn't have that red imprint on the back of his head. She told Naruto. He's still an idiot. He muttered to himself. I never said otherwise. The bounty hunter said, having heard what he'd said. I just hope any children he has will never be as stupid as him. If that happened, the future of airbending did not look good. If I can your attention, we're here. Their escort announced. They all stopped and looked up at the mountain before them. If what they had seen before was something, the large blue building built into the mountain was something that inspired awe. Whoa. And I thought the Earth King's palace was impressive. Sokka remarked. Just when he thought he had seen it all, something usually comes along and knocks that idea to the ground, sometimes a bit harder than needed. You get used to it. Jiraiya said with nonchalance. He had been to Kumo many times before, on both official and unofficial business, and had gotten used to the sight of the Reikage building. If there was one thing he knew about it, it served as an excellent landmark, particularly if you had no idea where you were and were trying to hide from angry women. Besides, it starts becoming a pain to walk up all those steps. He might not like it, but he was getting old. Then why don't you just walk up the side of the mountain? Naruto asked. It seemed like a pretty good idea to him. If you did that, the only way to get into the building would be to break a few windows. And the last time I checked, only one person in Kumo could do that. The Toad Sage drily remarked as he followed their guide into the mountain. The rest of the team just followed him in silence while Nyla and Akela waited outside, after June had told the Shirshu to behave itself. As it turned out, he was right. Climbing the stairs just to get to the office of the Reikage was a workout in and of itself. Apparently, from what their guide told them, students from the Kumo Academy trained on these stairs, going up and down repeatedly. The goal for them was to be able to get up to the same floor of the Reikage's office and back down in 10 minutes or less. While the shinobi in the group could see how that would work, and work well, for a trained shinobi could get up these stairs much quicker, the rest of the group couldn't and just thought that walking up the narrow, stone stairs was a very good form of torture, although none of them said that aloud. We're here. The guide announced as they came out of the staircase and into a hallway way that curved slightly. He didn't pause, he just kept walking and the others had to follow him. Thank the spirits. Sokka heaved as he tried to get his breath back. He knew that he was in good shape, he had to be, otherwise he would be dead. Dead. That was the way of the Southern Water Tribe, but the climb was exhausting. I think I almost died back there. Suck it up, Sokka. You're embarrassing us. Jiraiya told the water paragon, looking only slightly tired. Pardon me if I haven't been training to be a shinobi since I was 8. You could kill a man by making him walk those stairs without end. He complained. We don't do that, it's too messy. Their guide said in reply. It was a simple reply, but they all noticed that he didn't say how they killed someone. Before anyone could ask that question, he stopped in front of a door and opened it. The team from Konoha is here, Lord Reikage. He announced. Send them in. The gruff voice of the Reikage said from within the room. As they walked into the room, the ones who hadn't been there before couldn't help but compare it to the office of the Hokage. This office didn't have the shelves of books surrounding the desk. The only thing that was nearby was a punching bag. The office wasn't small, but it also wasn't overly huge. Behind the desk, the Reikage didn't in a chair. He lounged on a sofa. Even though most of the team, Jun and Naruto excluded, had seen him before, none of them, with the exception of Jiraiya, had actually met him. But they could tell by just his presence, which made people feel that he was bigger than he actually was, that he was someone not to be taken lightly. Standing by the sofa was a young, silver-haired woman dressed in somewhat formal clothes, at least for a shinobi. Lord Reikage. Jiraiya greeted the man with a respectable bow of his head. Jiraiya, he greeted curtly. Looking over at the blonde in the group, he scowled at him. So, you're the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. I don't think he likes you, Gaki. The aforementioned fox stated. He hadn't met the current Reikage, but he had some history with Kumo, so he knew the type of shinobi that came out of this village. I noticed. Naruto silently replied as he held eye contact with the man in front of him. And you're the guy who's not wearing a shirt. He remarked casually. The scowl deepened. Didn't Jiraiya ever teach you to respect your elders and betters? The Reikage asked him. Nope, he's teaching me how to last against the Akatsuki. The person who taught me to respect my elders was a sergeant in a Fire Nation boot camp. He also told me not to respect my betters, but to beat them. He had fond memories of that sergeant. Last time he had heard about him, he was training recruits at Akawan. The scowl on his face lessened somewhat as he nodded in acknowledgement. Well said. However, I will be frank with you. I don't like you Konoha types in my village. I'd rather leave you out of my village's business and pretend that we don't share something in common. Then why did you? Jun asked. The Reikage seemed to be a bit rude to her, but also had the priorities of his village before his own. She could respect him for that, on some level. Lord Killer Bee saw your fight with Orochimaru. The silver-haired woman explained, looking at Naruto. When he saw that you were unexperienced, he became worried and persuaded Lord A into having you come here to be trained. And why exactly would he care about that? He asked back. And who in the name of the spirits names their kid A? Jun asked as well. She had never heard of something like that before. Please tell me your parents' names weren't Y and Z. She told the Reikage. It's a Kumo tradition. Jiraiya explained, hoping to forestall any potential problems that might arise from that comment. The Reikage usually has a partner and together, they're called the AB combo. In the shinobi world, it's known as the strongest tag team. That would explain the names. Azula remarked quietly to herself. B never told me his reasons, but I gathered that if you weren't trained, the Akatsuki would go after you, which makes my brother a very large target. The Reikage said to Naruto. So basically, if your brother trains me, he'll have less of a painted target on his back. The blonde summarized. Correct. Do you resent me for that? He asked, challenging the person who was called the Shinobi Kikken. When he had heard that title for the first time, he had scoffed at the contradiction of it. Should I be? The Fire Paragon asked back. You place the well-being of your village and your brother above my own. You're a leader, you're supposed to do that. I can respect that. The challenging look in A's eyes disappeared. I had heard that you would have done the same for your village. It's a good thing to have if you want to lead Konoha. Yes, it is. He agreed. Everyone in the room had then realized that he hadn't said that he wasn't a part of Konoha anymore. But considering the fact that he hasn't rejoined Konoha, the chances of him leading it are highly unlikely. Sokka cut in before the questioning got awkward and/or hostile. We're just a group they've hired to help them take care of the Akatsuki. And currently, that apparently means getting trained by your brother. Naruto agreed after briefly looking at his fellow Paragon. Where is he? He's waiting for you, and you alone in the outermost training grounds. The Reikage pointed at the blonde with his finger before moving a piece of paper across the desk. Follow those instructions, and you'll get there. What about the rest of us? Azula demanded. Are we just going to wait here? If you want to watch, there's a roof that you can use nearby. That way, you'll be safe from the fight. Now get going. He ordered, flicking his fingers at them like they were children that needed to go away now. Some of the team looked offended by his actions, but Jiraiya herded them out of the room before anyone could say anything. Naruto stood in the training ground, waiting in silence. If he looked up and to the left, he could faintly make his teammates along with the Akela and Nyla. He hadn't been waiting that long, but he had expected the Raikage's brother to be there already. Dear Kami, please tell me he isn't one of those people who make an entrance. The blonde silently pleaded. Maybe he just got lost? The Kyuubi suggested, a little too innocently. He lives here. He can't get lost in his own village. He objected. Do I need to remind you of that one time when you were 6? That doesn't count. It was dark and it was a different neighborhood. Of course it was. The fox said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Before Naruto could say anything in response, a cloud of smoke appeared on the other end of the training field. Yo! Say! Ho! Cried a voice from within the cloud. A little birdie comes looking for training from me, the one and only Killer Bee. When the cloud dissipated, Naruto, the person the voice belonged to, in a ridiculous pose. He could only think of one thing to say. I'm pretty sure that you're the one who asked for me. He told the man on the other side of the training ground. The man was exactly like Sokka and Azula had said about him during the party celebrating Zuko's coronation. But it was one thing to hear about the man's bad rapping and listening to it in person. Now don't go changing the facts, it'll ruin the act. The man called Killer Bee admonished him, at least he thought it was supposed to be admonishing. You're here to be trained, even out in the rain. That's what I intend to do, so you will too. He crossed the training ground until he was a few feet in front of the blonde. Yeah, about that, he said almost to himself. Look, I mean no disrespect to you. But the fact is I really don't have time to deal with this kind of thing. I've got to deal with the Akatsuki and this would be kinda distracting. So why don't just tell your brother that you couldn't teach me and my team, and I will be on our way. It was a sound idea to him. He didn't have to worry time being wasted, and the Raikage wouldn't have to worry about them being in the village. Bee just stared at him, not saying a word. Do you mean to tell me that you're denying the chance to be trained by the great Killer Bee? He finally asked. Yeah, pretty much. Naruto answered easily with a grin. Fool, you fool. There's no choice in the matter. Between being trained and walking away, you're going with the former, not the latter. The Kumo shinobi in front of him shouted. The look of anger and fury that appeared on his face surprised the blonde. You're not leaving this place until I say so, and right now, I'm saying no. He rolled his eyes and heaved a sigh. So much for trying to get out of this the easy way, he thought to himself. When has that ever worked for you? The Kyuubi asked back. He didn't answer, mostly because when he did try, it landed him in more trouble. All right, if you insist on going through with this, what are we supposed to do? He asked B. We fight each other until I can see where you stand. I hope you're ready, 'cause if not, I'm going to rearrange the land. He reached back and somehow managed to throw all 7 swords strapped to his back into the air. As the swords came back, they all landed in odd places, like his elbow or behind his knee. He even held one in his mouth. In the end, he stood on one foot and had taken what Naruto could only assume was some kind of stance. What kind of stance is that? The blonde thought to himself. He was torn between stunned speechlessness and laughing out loud. But he still was impressed. He knew enough about swordplay to know that the stance he had was solid and steady. It looked like he had been using the stance, as well as the 7 swords, for a long time. An odd one, I'll grant you. The Kyuubi said as he looked at the stance himself. But still, don't let your guard down. Like I would, he retorted. That was the moment Killer Bee decided to strike. He launched himself at Naruto, flipping around in the air like a coin. When he landed, he started attacking the blonde, forcing him back and giving ground. His style of fighting was, for lack of a better word, unorthodox and confusing. Whoa! Naruto thought in surprise as he ducked and rolled out of the way of the swords. The swords didn't stay in one spot. B was constantly moving them, spinning them in the air before grabbing them again, and using them in a different way. Come on, you fool. You should try to fight, unless you have no might. He taunted Naruto as he kept on attacking. Was that supposed to be an insult? The blonde asked as he twisted away from one of the swords. He couldn't really tell with all that rapping the Kumo shinobi was doing. At the moment he really couldn't fight back. All he could do was to use the moves of airbending to stay out of the way, and potentially get around to B's back, but that wasn't likely at the moment. He knew he needed to get the swords away from his opponent, but the chances of that happening easily were not high. All the while, B kept on attacking. Every time Naruto tried to go one way, he immediately followed. His swords kept moving, like they had a life of their own. The blonde had already lost count of the number of times one of those swords had drawn blood, only for it to be healed shortly after, for which he was immensely glad for the accelerated healing he had. He soon got tired of only avoiding the swords. He leapt back to put some distance between the two of them, creating 3 clones in the process. As each one of them drew 2 kunai, they encircled B. Looks like he's going with the trapping method, Azula noted as she watched the fight from a borrowed pair of binoculars. The roof where Team Paragon was watching from was high enough to ensure they were out of potential danger, but not high enough so they wouldn't be able to hear the fight. I don't think that'll work well. It looks like it's working to me, Sokka said, also watching from a pair of binoculars. To him, Naruto and his clones had trapped B in one spot. He had been impressed by the fact that the Kumo shinobi was able to wield 7 swords all at the same time and in perfect coordination. When he saw that for the first time, he wondered how Piandao would do against Killer Bee. 2 masters of the sword, dueling one another. It would probably be the kind of fight that would produce either a lot of poetry or art. It might, if his target needed to move around to attack. June said, agreeing with Azula. But it looks like B can fight with ease in one spot. Just watch. They did and saw the truth of her words. While Naruto and his 3 clones circled B and fought him, he just turned, flipped, in place, and spun to strike back and block the kunai. The fight was going the same way it was before, only now it was stationary. Naruto needs to up his game if he wants to win this fight, the bounty hunter commented. He's not going to up his game, Jiraiya told her from where he leaned against the railing. He was the only one there who didn't have a pair of binoculars, as he had claimed he already knew how the fight was going to go. Both of them know this is only an evaluation fight. Until it's needed, neither of them will go any farther than what they think is needed. And for Naruto, that concept is a lot tighter than B's. It sounds like you know B, Suki remarked. He shrugged. We shared a few drinks and stories during peacetime. Once you get past his rapping, B's a likable guy. Well, the rapping is going to take a bit to get used to. And this is coming from the person who met some of the weirdest traveling musicians on our side of the planet. Sokka stated, remembering the whole Cave of Two Lovers fiasco, just thinking about it made him want to slap his forehead. The sound of flesh hitting flesh filled the air, turning their attention back to the fight below them. What happened? The water paragon demanded as he looked back down at the combatants. Naruto literally managed to get the drop on B, Azula told him as she kept her eyes all but glued to the binoculars. While the other 3 distracted him, he or one of the clones leapt overhead and managed to land a decent kick on B's shoulder. But it doesn't look like it really did anything, June noted. From what she saw, B hadn't slowed down in the slightest. He was still fighting at the same pace as before. That's because it didn't, Jiraiya said. B saw the kick coming, that's why it hit his shoulder. If he hadn't seen it, it would have gone to his head. Well, so much for that idea. Naruto thought to himself as he landed in a roll. The mid-air kick didn't do as much as he had hoped. In fact, it didn't look like it did anything at all. His opponent was still going strong. And the trapping method isn't doing much good either. I need a new strategy. Kit, use my chakra. The Kyuubi urged his Jinchuriki. He could see that the blonde was going to need now more than ever. No. He immediately replied. Kit, you're at a disadvantage and we both know it. If you use my chakra, the fight will be on more even ground. The fox tried to persuade him. I said no. No matter how hard the fight was or was going to be, he would not use the Kyuubi's chakra to gain an advantage. He would not lose control over himself. Now's not the time to be talking to your Biju. B admonished him. You lose focus and I'll beat you. With an ease that was enviable, the Kumo shinobi destroyed the 3 clones, stabbing them with his swords and making them dispel. See what I mean, you little bean? He could have taken those clones out at any time. Kami, take it, he's playing with me. The blonde realized with anger. How did you know I was talking to the Kyuubi? He all but demanded. You all but scream it, you fool. I'm guessing it told you to use its chakra like it's a tool. His whole body seemed to relax for a moment, like he was losing all the tension he had in it. And if that's your aim, then it's time for me to up my game. The 2 swords that were held in his hands were suddenly engulfed in chakra that crackled and hiss. He can channel his chakra into his swords. Naruto suddenly realized as he stared at those swords. He's a lightning-style user. Well, don't just stand there, idiot. Move your ass. The Kyuubi yelled at him. He jerked in surprise from the volume of the fox's voice, but promptly heeded its words. He twisted off to the side when B attacked him again. This time there was an added danger to the swords. Even though he had doubled his efforts to avoid the strikes of the swords, some still managed to get through. When he was hit, the lightning made the swords pierce deeper into his skin. That, in turn, made the accelerated healing take longer to close the wounds. That caused the pain feel like it lasted longer to him, like he was constantly being stung by bees. Later, he would acknowledge the irony of that description. There has got to be a way of making this fight easier for me. He mentally growled in frustration. His kunai were practically useless against swords that were enhanced with lightning style. Use my chakra, Gaki. The fox pressed him. I already said no. He snapped. There has to be a way other than that. He then realized something that, had he not been in the middle of a fight, would have made him pull a Sokka and slap his forehead. I am such a Kami-forsaken idiot. A fact I've never disputed. Shut up. He leapt back from B and held his 2 kunai up to his face in a guard. Futon, Shinkajin, wind style, vacuum blade. He breathed his chakra on the kunai, letting it take the shape of wind and giving the 2 a longer range and a better edge. Much better, he openly remarked as B came at him again. This time, he didn't dodge, instead he met his opponent head-on, his kunai clashing with the swords. The kunai held, not breaking in half as he had feared beforehand. Looks like you have some bite. B calmly noted as he pushed against the kunai, making the blonde push back with equal force. Now I have to wonder if you can back it up with your might. Let's find out. Naruto replied, disengaging the lock between the swords and kunai, and gave his opponent a spinning round kick to his side. It made him stumble slightly, but that was enough for the blonde. He pressed forward, switching from the air-bending stance he had taken into a fire-bending stance. I guess fire and wine do work well together. He noted to himself as he slashed through one of B's swords, cutting it in half with one of the kunai. He hooked the other kunai onto his finger and started spinning it around, creating a deadly windmill. B tried to break past the windmill, but it acted like a shield. It had cost him one of his swords, catching him by surprise. He had thought that since his control over his chakra was probably better than his opponent's, his swords would be able to hold against the kunai. But he was mistaken. It cost him a sword, and then it cost him another when it went through another sword. An impressive shield you have created, he admitted to Naruto. It seems like something that can't be penetrated. That was the idea. The Fire Paragon replied as he used the spinning kunai to force B back and destroyed 2 more swords. And now, you've got only 2 swords left. You really can't use that weird swordplay anymore, can you? Shouldn't have said that, the Kyuubi commented. That may be, but being at a disadvantage it does not make me. He lunged at Naruto with one of his swords in a stabbing move. While it looked like it was heading for the windmill, its actual target was the finger the kunai was hooked to. Naruto realized this just as the sword was about to pierce the finger and jerked it away. However, that action made the kunai itself fly off his finger and sail through the air before embedding itself in a nearby tree. That distracted Naruto for a moment, but that moment was enough. With a flick of his wrist, he cut the remaining kunai from just under the blade, leaving only the hilt in Naruto's hand. You tried talking smack, now I've paid you back. Fool, you fool. Damn it. The blonde silently swore as he dropped the ruined hilt. He had a feeling that if he tried to reach for more kunai, he wouldn't let him. I did say you shouldn't have said that, his tenant told him. I thought I already told you to shut up. 2 swords remain for the killer bee, but I think it's time to show you why you came to me, B told him as he put away his 2 remaining swords. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto demanded. It's time for the 8th. He stuck his hand into the air, making a gesture that probably made sense only to him, and shouted Wee. Chakra that was the color of red began to appear and cover his body. The chakra didn't stay still as it covered the Kumo shinobi, it boiled and hissed as well as having parts of it bubble over and pop open. Naruto could only stare in growing horror as the red chakra fully covered B. The Kumo Jinchuriki stood there with ease as the red chakra created 8 tails that flowed behind him, as well as 2 horns above his head. Here I come, you fool, he said, charging straight forward. Crap. Naruto thought to himself as he leapt out of the way of the charge. It was fast but linear. If he kept his focus on B, he'd probably be okay. But he had never faced an opponent who had something like this in his arsenal. Gaara didn't really count, mostly because he went straight to the sand and was raving by the time Naruto had gotten there. Kit, for the love of Kami, will you just use my chakra already? The Kyuubi all but ordered him. You need it now more than ever. How many times do I have to say it, furball? I am not using your chakra, he replied both stubbornly and defiantly. If you don't, then you can't beat him. There's no way around the chakra if you don't make one yourself. There has to be one. There just had to be a way to get past the chakra without losing control over his body. Are you not listening to me? There isn't one. If you want to beat him, you must use my chakra. So do it. I thought I told you, now's not the time to be talking to your Biju, B told him, getting his attention. The Kumo shinobi stood on the other side of the now scarred training ground. The red chakra still covered him, and it didn't look like it was going anywhere. You stop paying attention, I'll give you domination. He charged forward, his arm out and ready to use lariat. When he saw what was coming, Naruto chose to not get out of the way. Instead, he took an earth-bending stance and waited. Just as the arm was going to slam into him, he reached out and grabbed hold, pushing back against it. He skidded back a few feet as B tried to keep moving. It was a struggle that lasted quite a few seconds before B finally stopped. Without saying a word, he dropped his arm and stepped back, dispelling the red chakra. What? Are you giving up? Naruto challenged him in a panting voice. You didn't use the chakra of your Biju, B said almost quietly. Damn right I didn't. he said with pride in his voice. You sure are a fool. Didn't you realize? If you had used it, the fight would be over and the damage would have been marginalized. If it was possible to have disdain in one's voice while rapping, B was able to do it. What are you talking about? The fight is over. He protested, only to start feeling pain in his hands. Looking down at them, they looked like they had been badly burned, and it didn't feel like his accelerated healing was working. The fight isn't over, not until I say so. And now, I'm thinking no. He turned his back on the blonde and began to walk away. Be here tomorrow in the morning, 2 hours after the sun rises. We'll fight and you'll see where the truth lies. I already know the truth. He shouted at the back of the Kumo shinobi, anger filling his voice. I won't use the fox's chakra. I won't let it take control of me. If B had heard him, he didn't say anything. He just left the field, leaving Naruto to deal with the pain in his hands. While they would heal in just a few hours, it didn't feel like that to Naruto. He collapsed to his knees, the pain filling the rest of his senses. He lost. Sokka said in stunned surprise. He really couldn't believe it. Ever since he had met the blonde, he had always thought that he was unbeatable. To see him get beaten so easily was like a bad wake-up call. That went as expected. Jiraiya said with a shrug of his shoulders, sounding disinterested at what had just happened. That made everyone there look over at him. Are you saying that you were expecting that outcome? Suki demanded. I thought you had faith in Naruto. Suki, I knew what the outcome was going to be before the fight even started. Naruto never had a chance against B, not the way he is now. He explained. If he wants to beat B, he's going to have to change. Change what? A lot of things, he answered both cryptically and simply. But he's going to have to figure out that for himself. We can't help him there. As much as he wanted to help Naruto, the only person who could at this point was B. Come on. He said to them as he turned around and went for the entrance back into the mountain. Let's get down there and help him get back to the hotel. The others heartily agreed with that idea as they rushed after him. When they finally heard Naruto scream in pain, it urged them to go faster. Location, Raikage's office. A was working on the bane of all Kage's past and present, paperwork. He was alone in the office, trying to focus on what was in front of him. Mabui had threatened to take away his barbells and punching bag away and lock him in the office if he didn't, but he couldn't focus. He was completely bored. When someone knocked on the door, he looked up from the paperwork, secretly glad something else had his attention. Who is it? He asked aloud. The door opened and B walked into the room. Yo, bro, he greeted it casually. The Raikage raised an eyebrow in question. B was never one to enter a room or greet someone he knew casually. I take it that your little fight with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is done? He asked. B nodded in answer. Good, I'll make preparations to have you two transported to the island. You might want to wait on that. His brother told him, speaking without rapping, and with a serious expression on his face. His tone of voice got A's attention immediately. What happened? The Raikage demanded. He's afraid of his Bju's chakra and refuses to use it. I can't take him to the island until he does use it. B explained to his brother. We'll have to stay in Kumo until then. Why would he be afraid of the Bju's chakra? The chakra of a Biju was dangerous just by itself. If a Jinchuriki knew how to properly harness it, they would become a powerhouse. Personally, he thought that every Jinchuriki would want to know how to do that. Both B and Yujiro sure did. I don't know. But currently, I need to know how good he is with the Kyuubi's chakra, whether it's rage-induced or not. Once I've seen that, I'll take him to the island. Until then, I'll just keep at him, making him fight until he does use the chakra. Very well, but be sure it happens soon, B. The sooner these Konoha mercenaries are gone from Kumo, the better. He didn't like people from the other hidden villages, shinobi especially, in Kumo. For all he knew, they could be spies trying to gather intelligence and report it back to their village. It'll take as long as it takes, bro. He replied with a shrug of his shoulders. No more and no less. That's all I can give you. Fine, he conceded. At least he knew that if B was going to do something, it was going to be done. Is there anything else you needed? B shook his head. Nah, bro, that's all. He said, rapping once again. But that is one hell of a paperwork load. And here I thought you had cracked its code. Keeping talking, B, and I'll give you the iron claw. A warned him with a growl. Now that the serious discussion was over, he had to get back to the paperwork, and he wasn't up for his brother's usual antics. I highly doubt that. He replied with what almost seemed like smugness in his voice. You try to get away from the paper and Mabui will come after you with a new stack. And since you're already busy with all of this paper, I won't be a blind beggar. That's it. Come here, B. The rakage leapt over his desk. Realizing that he should have just kept his mouth shut, B turned around and bolted. It soon became a merry chase around the building. Thankfully, people in the building knew to get out of the way when something like happened, as it did often. The chase finally ended when A caught B just as he was about to escape from the building. Even though his screams echoed around the village, nobody really paid attention to it. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.